You know that specific kind of silence that falls over a country road, right before everything goes sideways. The kind where the crickets stop chirping and the air gets heavy and thick like a wool blanket. That was exactly how the air felt on the outskirts of Oak Haven last Tuesday as I was easing my late father's vintage '68 Mustang down County Road 9. The sun was just dipping below the tree line, painting the sky in these bruised shades of purple and orange, and I was feeling good, really good, because I was finally home to settle the estate, to pack up the memories of a man who taught me that integrity is what you do when nobody's watching. But apparently, somebody was watching, and they didn't like what they saw: a black woman in a pristine classic car that looked like it cost more than the patrol cruiser idling behind the billboard. I saw the lights before I heard the siren, that aggressive strobe reflecting in my rearview mirror, blinding and frantic, and my stomach just dropped, not out of fear, but out of a deep, exhausting resignation, because I just knew, that my speedometer hadn't budged past 45. In a 50 zone, I pulled over onto the gravel shoulder, the dust kicking up around the tires, and kept my hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, visible, steady, the way my daddy taught me before I ever put on a uniform, before I ever earned the stars that were currently sitting in my travel bag in the trunk. The officer who approached didn't look like he was there to protect and serve. He looked like he was there to conquer. A man named Sheriff Brock Hatcher, a guy whose reputation for cleaning up the streets was really just a polite way of saying he terrorized the residents of the Bottoms, the historic black neighborhood where my father lived, until they sold their homes for pennies on the dollar. Hatcher tapped on the glass with his flashlight, a heavy metallic clack that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet cabin. And when I rolled the window down, the smell of chewing tobacco and stale coffee hit me before he even spoke. License and registration. He didn't ask, he demanded, his eyes hidden behind mirrored aviators even though the sun was basically gone. And as I moved my hand slowly toward the glove box, narrating my actions like I was defusing a bomb, I am reaching for my registration, officer. He already had his hand on his holster. I handed over my civilian driver's license, the one that lists my address right there on Poplar Street in the Bottoms, and I saw his lip curl, a sneer that wasn't just about race. It was about class, about geography, about the fact that people from my zip code weren't supposed to be driving American muscle cars in mint condition. "This is a nice ride for a local," Hatcher said, looking over the roof of the car at his partner, a younger, nervous-looking deputy named Miller who was shifting his weight from foot to foot like he wanted to be anywhere else. "You steal it. Or is your boyfriend a drug dealer?" I took a breath, holding it in my lungs for a second to cool the fire that was starting to climb up my throat. "This vehicle belonged to my father, Reverend Elias Vance, and I am the executor of his estate," I said, my voice calm, icy, the voice I use when I'm briefing the Joint Chiefs. But Hatcher wasn't hearing it. He just chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Step out of the vehicle," he barked, swinging the door open before I could even unbuckle, grabbing my arm with a grip that was tight enough to leave bruises, yanking me out onto the gravel so hard I stumbled. "Officer, I have not committed a traffic violation," I stated, trying to regain my footing, trying to maintain dignity while he spun me around and slammed me against the warm metal of the hood. "You are detaining me without probable cause." Decide the cause," Hatcher hissed in my ear, his breath hot and gross against my neck. "And right now, the cause is your resisting a lawful order and suspect vehicle theft." He kicked my legs apart, patting me down way too aggressively, his hands lingering in places that had nothing to do with searching for weapons, just pure power play, pure degradation intended to make me feel small, to remind me that in Oak Haven, he was the law and I was just another body to be processed. He cuffed me, the metal biting into my wrists, clicking shut with a finality that made my heart hammer against my ribs, not because I was scared of jail, but because I knew exactly what this was. This was the squeeze.c. For the last 6 months, the Bottoms had been under siege. Developers wanted the land for a new luxury outlet mall, and Mayor Harlan Thorne had been working hand in hand with the sheriff to make life miserable for anyone who wouldn't sell. They'd ticket you for grass being too high, for parking in your own driveway, for walking too slow. for breathing wrong. Until the fines piled up so high you had to sell your house just to pay the county. They didn't. No, I knew this. They didn't know that my father had sent me letters, detailed logs of every harassment, every threat, every neighbor who had packed up and left in the middle of the night. They tossed me into the back of the cruiser, the hard plastic seat smelling of vomit and disinfectant. And as we drove to the station, Hatcher was on the radio, laughing. Yeah, got another one from Poplar. Thinks she's special, driving a '68 Mustang. Probably chop-shopped it. While I sat there, silence wrapping around me like armor, memorizing the route, counting the seconds, cataloging every procedural error. They didn't read me my Miranda rights. They didn't secure my vehicle properly. They just left it on the side of the road for the tow truck Hatcher's brother-in-law owned. And they sure as hell didn't know who they had just put in handcuffs. The station was a chaotic mess of ringing phones and fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry hornets. They paraded me through the booking area, Hatcher making a show of pushing me forward. Move it, sweetheart, while the other deputies snickered, except for Miller, the young one, who looked at me with this flicker of shame in his eyes, like he knew this was wrong, but was too terrified of Hatcher to say a word. They booked me, fingerprinted me, and when the booking officer asked for my occupation, I paused, looking Hatcher dead in the eye through the glass partition. Government employee, I said softly. Department of Sanitation. Hatcher cracked a joke, and the room erupted in laughter. Put her in holding. Let her stew for a few hours. Maybe she'll be more cooperative when the mayor gets here. He likes to have a word with the stubborn ones. That was the tell the mayor was coming. Why would the mayor come to a traffic arrest unless this was a coordinated effort? A pressure campaign? They shoved me into a cell that was barely big enough to turn around in. The bench cold steel. The toilet in the corner lacking any privacy. And I sat there, back straight, hands folded in my lap, closing my eyes and visualizing the chain of command. Visualizing the protocols I had written for situations exactly like this, though usually involving foreign hostiles, not domestic tyrants. About an hour later, the heavy door clanked open, and in "I want to help you," Thorne smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The Bottoms. It's a dying neighborhood, sweetheart. We're just trying to put it out of its misery. Sign the papers and you walk. I stood up then, slowly, walking to the bars until I was inches from his face. I think I'll make my phone call now. Hatcher laughed, stepping forward. You think a lawyer is gonna help you? The judge is the mayor's cousin. The public defender plays golf with me. You got nobody. I have the right to one call, I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming absolute steel. Unless you want to add deprivation of civil rights under color of law to the list of felonies you're currently committing. Hatcher sneered, unlocking the cell. Fine. Waste your dime. Phone's on the wall. Make it quick. I walked to the phone, conscious of them watching, waiting for me to call a bail bondsman or a crying relative. I picked up the receiver, but I didn't dial a local number. I dialed a sequence I had memorized 20 years ago. The line clicked, a secure tone buzzed, and then a crisp voice answered. Command Center, identify. This is General Althea Vance, authorization code. Zulu Tango Alpha 409er. Priority 1 distress. I am being illegally detained by hostile elements at the Oak Haven Police Department. Requesting immediate intervention and extraction. Initiate protocol Overwatch. The silence in the room behind me was heavy, confused. Hatcher looked at the mayor. Who is she talking to? Who is Zulu Tango? I turned around, the receiver still to my ear, and for the first time that night, I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. I'm not talking to a lawyer, sheriff. I'm talking to the Pentagon. The hell you are, Hatcher barked, reaching for the phone to slam it down. But the voice on the other end was loud enough for him to hear. Copy, General. Assets are deploying from Fort Benning, ETA 18 minutes. Federal jurisdiction is asserted. Do not disengage. Hatcher froze, his hand hovering over the receiver. The color drained out of Mayor Thorne's face so fast it looked like he was going to faint. General. Thorne whispered, looking at my dusty jeans, my flannel shirt. You're a general? Lieutenant General, United States Air Force, Commander of Cyber Operations. I corrected him, hanging up the phone gently. And you gentlemen have just made the biggest mistake of your lives." The dynamic in the room shifted instantly. It went from predator and prey to boys who realized they had just poked a sleeping dragon. This is a misunderstanding." Thorne stammered, backing up. "Sheriff, why didn't you check her ID? She gave me a civilian license." Hatcher shouted, sweat beading on his forehead. "How was I supposed to know? Ignorance of the law is not a defense, Sheriff." "You taught me that," I said, moving back to the bench and sitting down comfortably. "Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to wait right here for my colleagues. And I suggest you don't try to shred anything, because protocol overwatch means satellites are already logging your digital traffic. Every email, every text, every deleted file, we have it all." That was a bluff mostly, but they didn't know that. Hatcher looked like he was about to vomit. He looked at Deputy Miller. "Get the files from the back, the real estate files. Burn them." "Now, no," Miller said, his voice shaking but loud. He stepped away from the desk. "No, Sheriff, I'm not going to jail for you. I gave you an order." Hatcher screamed, reaching for his gun, but Miller already had his hand on his own weapon, creating a standoff right there in the booking room. "Don't do it, Brock. It's over." The tension was so thick you could choke on it. The mayor was frantically typing on his phone, probably trying to transfer assets or call his cousin the judge. But I just watched the clock on the wall. Tick, tick, tick. Then the sound came. Not a siren, a low, rhythmic thrumming that shook the coffee in the mugs on the desks. It got louder, vibrating the floorboards, rattling the windows in their frames. Hatcher ran to the window and looked out, his face turning ghostly pale. "Oh, my God. What is it?" Thorne demanded. "Helicopter," Hatcher whispered. "And SUVs. Lots of them. Black ones." The front doors of the station didn't just open. They were practically blown off their hinges by military police officers in full tactical gear, weapons drawn, moving with a precision that made Hatcher's deputies look like mall cops. Behind them walked Colonel Davies, my second in command, looking like a thunderstorm wrapped in a uniform. "Secure the perimeter." Davies barked. "Nobody leaves. Phones down. Hands where I can see them." Hatcher raised his hands slowly, his aviators slipping down his sweaty nose. Thorne tried to pull the "do you know who I am" card, stepping forward with his politician smile. "Now look here, I am the mayor of this city, and I don't care if you're the King of England." Davies cut him off, not even breaking stride. "You are detaining a high-ranking United States military officer without cause. You are currently considered a hostile entity." He looked at the holding cell. "General Vance, status, unharmed." "Colonel," I said, standing up, "but I believe my civil rights, and the rights of this community, have been severely violated." "Get that door open," Davies ordered Hatcher. The sheriff fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking so bad he dropped them twice. When he finally unlocked the door, I stepped out, rubbing my wrists where the cuffs had dug in. I didn't look at Hatcher. I walked straight to the booking desk, picked up my personal effects bag, and turned to the room. "Colonel, have your team secure the server room," I ordered, slipping back into command mode. "I want a full audit of all arrest records for the last 24 months, specifically targeting property seizures and forced sales in the 303 zip code. And get the FBI on the line. This isn't just a military matter anymore. This is a RICO case." The mayor slumped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "It was just business," he muttered. "Just business." "No, Harlan," I said, leaning over him. "Destroying my father's legacy? Pushing grandmothers out of their homes so you can build a strip mall? That's not business. That's war, and you just lost." The chaos inside the Oakhaven station was clinical, precise. A beautiful contrast to the sloppy tyranny Hatcher had been running for years. My team moved like water, flowing into every corner of the building. Within 20 minutes, the local deputies were disarmed and sitting in a row against the wall in the break room, looking like schoolboys in detention, while my cyber specialists were already pulling hard drives from the server racks. I watched Deputy Miller sitting apart from the others, head down, and I walked over to him. "You stood up," I said quietly. He looked up, terrified. I didn't know, ma'am. I mean, General. I suspected the quotas, the way Hatcher targeted the older folks in the bottoms. But I was scared. I need this job. I got a kid on the way. Courage isn't about not being scared, Miller. It's about doing what's right when your knees are knocking together, I told him, handing him a bottle of water. You'll be a witness, not a suspect. Cooperation goes a long way. Meanwhile, Colonel Davies had set up a makeshift command post in the sheriff's office, Hatcher's office, sweeping aside the framed photos of him shaking hands with the governor. We laid out the digital map of Oak Haven on the big screen. It was damning. Bright red clusters of arrests, code violations, and random stops were concentrated entirely in the bottoms, forming a perfect ring around the area slated for the new development project labeled Project Silver Horizon. Look at this. Davies pointed to a series of emails we just decrypted. Mayor Thorne was communicating directly with a developer in Atlanta. Squeeze them harder. He says here in an email from last month, I need the Vance property. It's the linchpin for the access road. I felt a cold chill. They didn't just stop me because I was driving a nice car. They stopped me because I was the obstacle. My father had refused to sell, and now that he was gone, they thought I was the weak link they could snap. Hatcher and Thorne were being held in separate interrogation rooms, their own interrogation rooms, which was a poetic justice I savored. I walked into Thorne's room first. He was sweating through his expensive suit, no longer the slick politician. General, please, he started, his voice trembling. We can work this out. The development. It's going to bring jobs, thousands of jobs. I was thinking of the greater good. The greater good doesn't require planting drugs on teenagers or impounding the cars of the elderly. Harlan, I said, tossing a folder of printed emails onto the metal table. We found the kickbacks, the offshore accounts in the Caymans where the developers were depositing your consulting fees. You weren't building a future for Oak Haven. You were building a retirement fund for yourself. He went silent, staring at the table. And Hatcher? I asked. What was his cut? He didn't care about the money as much, Thorne whispered. Defeated. He just wanted the power. He wanted the bottoms. Gone because he hated that they were still there. He hated that they had history he couldn't touch. He wanted to erase it. I left him there and went to Hatcher's room. The sheriff was different. He wasn't scared. He was angry. He was pacing when I entered. He stopped and glared. You think you've won. He spat. You think because you got some stars on your shoulder you understand this town. These people need a heavy hand. They're animals. I didn't yell. I didn't hit him. I just sat down and looked at him with pity. We're not animals, Brock. We're citizens. And the only animal in this room is the one who used a badge to hunt people. I signaled the MP at the door. Process him. Federal charges. Conspiracy. Racketeering. Deprivation of rights. And let's add kidnapping for tonight's little stunt. The sun was coming up by the time the FBI arrived to officially take custody. The sight of Mayor Thorne and Sheriff Hatcher being led out of the station, in handcuffs, the same handcuffs they loved to snap on innocent wrists, was something the town of Oak Haven would never forget. People had gathered outside, residents from the bottoms, folks from Silver Bluff, watching in stunned silence as the power structure that had loomed over them for decades crumbled in a single night. I walked out to the parking lot, my father's Mustang finally released from the impound lot and brought to the front. It was dusty, but unharmed. Deputy Miller was standing there, holding my keys. I checked the engine, General. He said awkwardly, they didn't touch it. It's a beautiful car. Keep your nose clean, Miller, I said, taking the keys. This town is going to need a new sheriff, one who knows the difference between policing a community and occupying it. I drove the Mustang back to the bottoms. The neighborhood was waking up. I pulled into my father's driveway, the engine purring that deep, throaty rumble, and I turned it off. I sat there for a long time, just gripping the wheel, letting the adrenaline fade, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. We had won, yes. The scheme was broken. The corrupt were in chains. But I looked at the house across the street, boarded up because Mrs. Gable couldn't pay the bogus fines. I looked at the empty lot where the community center used to be before Hatcher shut it down. For code violations, you can arrest the bad guys, But you can't rest the trauma they leave behind. You can't handcuff the years of fear. I stayed in Oak Haven for another month. We set up a legal clinic in my dad's living